Erev Tov, everyone. Erev Tov. And welcome to the House of Seven Beggars. It is Monday night on Chol HaMoed. Yes, this is Chol HaMoed Pesach. It is Monday night, and this is the House of Seven Beggars. Therefore, it must be Zeyde Story Corner. That's right, Zeyde's Story Corner. So, had a wonderful Pesach. Yes, we did. Very nice. Yeah, it was. We had some guests. We had some great food, good discussions on the Haggadah, and yeah, wonderful, wonderful, and it continues. So good to have you all here today. Let's see who we have in the chat room. We have Shlomo and Miles, Dorothy, and Delane. And this is about it. Yeah, that's about it for now. Of course, they'll be coming in late. Yeah, yeah, always they'll be coming in late, and we know. And there are, of course, those are watching in the background who are not logged in, who are watching too. There's a few of them there. So, okay, so nothing less. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because of Pesach and because as many of you just in the same position as me, continuing to clean right up until the last minute. So, yeah, so we didn't have a show last week so that we could prepare for Pesach. And then, so we are back this week. And I want to thank Reb Shlomo for doing the services over Pesach. And things were just so crazy around here that with guests and everything else that it just was not possible to actually do a service. I mean, of course, we did the prayers and stuff like that, but to actually have a full blown service, there's just too much commotion going on. So Reb Shlomo stood in for us. So we're going to continue with the stories. And the Yiddish stories, yeah, from the Yiddish folk tales. So let me get you onto your camera. There I am on my camera. Good to see you all. Good to be back. Okay. Let us pick up where we left off, shall we? Okay, so this story is called The Golden Feather. Once upon a time, there was a well to do business holder who had 12 sons, 11 of whom were clever, while one was a fool. The same man owned a mare that had 12 colts, 11 of which were handsome, while one was ugly. The father lined up the 12 horses before his sons, and the 11 clever sons, of course, they chose the 11 handsome horses. The ugly horse was left for the fool, and at this the fool began to cry. But the ugly horse said to him, "If you will stop crying and do everything I tell you, I'll tell you how to turn me into a handsome horse." "All right," said the fool. "I'll do everything you ask. First, wash me and comb me," said the horse. "Then I will be handsomer than any of the other horses." So the fool washed and combed him, and the horse turned very handsome. "Now," said the horse, "harness me, and we'll take a drive." The fool harnessed him up, and they drove off. As they went along, They saw something glistening on the roadway. The fool said, "Stop! I want to know what it is." The horse stopped, and the fool saw that the bright thing was a golden feather from some sort of a golden bird, you would imagine. The fool wanted to pick up the feather, but the horse said, "Don't do it. I didn't tell you to pick it up. If you do, you're only asking for trouble." The fool said, "I'm not listening to you. I want a golden feather." "But," said the horse, "you promised you'd obey me. And I tell you that if you take it, you'll have more troubles than you ever dreamed." But the fool would not listen. He picked up the feather, and they went on their way into the dense forest. There they became lost, and it grew darker, and the darker it grew, the brighter the feather glowed. The fool was delighted. "Go on," said the horse. "Be happy. Your troubles will come soon enough." But the fool ignored him. They went deeper into the woods until all at once they saw a hut. The fool said, "Stop here, horse. Let's go to the hut and spend the night there." "No," said the horse, "don't do it." But the fool ignored him and went into the hut, where he found 3 young peasant women sitting. "Can we spend the night?" he asked. "We can't say," they replied. "Our mother is a witch, whose name is Boveha. She'll be home soon, and you can ask her yourself." The fool showed them the golden feather, which lit up the entire hut. The peasant women shivered with pleasure and said, "It's a truly beautiful feather, but we can't give you permission to spend the night. You'll have to wait until Bobeha comes back." Just then, Bobeha showed up with a great noise. Rat-a-tat, rat-a-tat, for one of her feet was made of iron. The young woman said they want to spend the night. Then they showed Bobeha the golden feather. And she said to the fool and his horse, "Yes, you may spend the night, but you'll have to sleep on the floor with your heads at the threshold." The fool said, "That's all right. We'll sleep on the floor with our heads at the threshold." Then Bobeha ran off once again to the woods. The household settled down to sleep. The 3 young peasant women lay in their usual places, while the fool and his horse lay down on the floor with their heads at the threshold. A little while later, the host said, "Ah, we're in trouble. I warned you not to pick up the golden feather. I said it would get us into trouble. Bobeha would never have let us pass the night if we hadn't had the feather." "Well, what can we do now?" asked the fool. I'll tell you what to do, said the horse. Carry her 3 daughters over to our side of the hut. Put them down in our places with their heads at the threshold, and we'll lie in their places. Must be big beds, huh? You get the horse in the bed. Have you ever seen a horse in a bed? They take up all the room. Okay, so the fool did as he was told. He put the 3 sleeping daughters on the floor with their heads at the threshold, and he and his horse lay in their places. Suddenly, in the middle of the night, Bobeha came hurrying back from the forest. She dashed up to the threshold and gave such a terrible stamp with her iron foot that it shattered the heads of her daughter, and they flew right off in all directions. Can you imagine such a thing? Then she ran back to the forest. The horse said to the fool, "Quickly, harness me up. Take the golden feather and let's get away. Drive me as hard as you can." The fool harnessed the horse as quickly as he could. Then he grabbed up the feather, and off they went. The next morning, miserable indeed was Bobeha when she came back to her hut from the forest and saw what she had done with her iron foot. "Woe is me," she wailed. "I hacked my own daughters' heads off, and those 2 have escaped with the golden feather. Oh, woe! Oh, woe!" And she started off in pursuit of them. She chased them, and they ran for dear life. And as they ran, they heard the rat-tat-tat-tat of her iron foot. "She's chasing us! She's chasing us!" cried the fool. "Yes, I heard her," said the horse. "Didn't I tell you trouble would follow you if you picked up the feather? But you wouldn't listen. Well, don't panic. I have an idea. Fill a pitcher with water and throw it over your head, and it will turn into a river that she won't be able to cross." The fool did as he was told. He filled a pitcher with water and threw it over his head, and it turned into a broad river. When Bobeha came to the river, she could not cross it. So she ran back home, snatched up a pot and ladle, and used them to quickly empty the river. Then she raced on in pursuit of the fool and his horse. She ran after them, and they fled with all their might. And as they ran, they heard again the rat-tat-tat of her iron foot. "She's chasing us! She's chasing us!" cried the fool to his horse. "Yes, yes, 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 I heard her. Didn't I tell you that troubles would follow if you picked up that feather? But you wouldn't listen. Well, don't panic. I've got an idea. Pluck a handful of twigs and throw them over your head, and they'll turn into a forest so dense she won't be able to push through." So that's what he did. He plucked a handful of twigs and threw them over his head, and they turned into a dense forest that she could not push through. Back she went to her home, where she grabbed a hatchet and used it to chop a path through the forest. She raced on in pursuit of them. She chased them, and they fled with all their might. And as they ran, they heard again the rat-tat-tat of her iron foot. "Help!" the fool begged the horse. "Help! What shall we do? We are doomed." The horse said, "Shh, don't panic. I have an idea. Take a heap of sand and throw it over your head, and it will turn into a high mountain that she won't be able to climb." So that's what the fool did. He took a heap of sand and threw it over his head, and it turned into a high mountain. When Bobiha came to it, she couldn't climb over. Back she ran to her house, grabbed a spade, and used it to shovel the mountain away. Then she raced on after them. Again they heard the rat-a-tat-tat of her iron foot. The fool cried to the horse, "Do you hear? Oh, woe is me! Oh, woe is me!" "Hush! Don't panic," said the horse. "I have an idea. Chop some wood into kindling. Start a fire, and let the wood burn down to coals. Then take the coals, pour them into a hole outside the forest, and put a thin wire across the hole. When Bobiha comes out of the forest and sees the coals, she'll try to walk over the wire to get to the other side, but the wire will bend, and she'll fall into the coals and burn to death." So, that's what the fool did. He chopped down some wood into kindling and built a fire that he allowed to burn down onto hot coals. Then he poured the coals into a hole near the forest and set a wire across the hole. When Bobiha came out of the forest, she saw the hot coals in the hole. She tried to cross over the wire, but it bent, and she fell on the burning coals and burned to death. Well, now that they were rid of Bobiha, the fool and the horse turned around and went back home. When they got there, and when the fool's brothers saw how handsome his horse was and how brightly the golden feathers shone, they liked him even less than before. But the horse, seeing the look of envy in their eyes, said to the fool, "You'll have to leave home. Harness me up, and let's run off as fast as we can, because your life is in danger here." So the fool harnessed the horse, and they ran away until they came to a large village surrounded by fields. The fool plowed and sowed the fields and became very rich. He sowed rye and ground it into flour, and the horse carried loaves of bread to the city where the fool distributed them to the poor, and everyone was happy. And he had the dear horse to thank for it all. Oh, what a horse! What a horse it was! A horse in a million, as they say. Okay, interesting story. Okay, now we are going to go on to the next story as soon as we get to it. Okay, this story is called the Tale of the Stingy Woman. So let us begin. Once there was a village woman, an innkeeper's wife, who was very rich. It never occurred to her that she would die one day, and so she never contributed anything to the community. No charity, no alms, nothing. The village therefore watched her like a hawk and waited for a chance to get even. Well, no one is immortal. Her husband, God keep us from this shame. Her husband died. Naturally, he had to be buried. But she, the stingy woman, that she was, devised a scheme to save the cost of burying him. Luck was with her, because a butcher who used to come to her inn to buy cattle and fowl was there on the night her husband died. She took the butcher into another room, gave him food and strong drink, got him good and drunk, really very drunk. Then she put him to bed. A drunken man, does he have any idea what's happening to him? She dressed her husband's corpse in the butcher's clothes and dressed the butcher in the white grave clothes. He, poor sudden fellow, slept through it all. When she was finished, she sent word to his wife that he had died at the inn. The members of the burial society arrived. Well, what was to be done? They could hardly demand money from the butcher's impoverished wife, so they carried the corpse out and buried it. And that's how the stingy woman got her husband buried without spending a penny. Some 2 or 3 days later, the butcher woke up and saw that he was dressed in white. Wondering what sort of trouble he had gotten into, he ran off to his wife. Isn't it in the truth that trouble comes? That's what men do. Yeah. Jenny, he called, open the door, it's me. Oh, whoa, Sarah, what do you want of me? Go back to your resting place. Dear wife, what are you talking about? What's happened to you? She shrieked, go back to your resting place. Seeing that she would not let him in, he ran off to the rabbi. Rabbi, open up, he said. My son, said the rabbi, you have received all the proper rights due a pious Jew. Go back to your resting place. The butcher, finding how bad things were and seeing that no one would let him get near, went to the cemetery. Where else could he go? Meanwhile, though he was in the graveyard, the butcher grew terribly hungry. He looked around. It was early morning, and saw local women passing by with baked goods in baskets. He leapt out at them. When they saw what they thought was a dead man, they dropped their baskets and ran off, leaving him with plenty to eat. Then the villager who was carrying eggs came along. As soon as he saw the butcher, he dropped his basket of eggs and ran off. Must have been scrambled eggs, eh? So the butcher sat in his ease, dining happily on baked goods and eggs. Just then, someone carrying a little barrel of brandy drove up. Seeing what he thought was a corpse, he dropped the barrel and ran off. So now, the butcher had loaves of bread, eggs, and brandy. But sooner or later, things turned bad. He couldn't sit there forever. So he went once more to the rabbi's house. Rabbi, what's going on here? I'm a living person. What does everyone have against me? The rabbi asked, where have you been? Where do you come from? The butcher explained that he had gone to the inn, that the woman had gotten him drunk, and that he had slept for 3 days. that when he awoke up, he found himself dressed in white. When he came home to his wife, she cried, "Go back to your resting place." Then I came to you, and the same thing happened. Finally, everyone understood the innkeeper's trick. There was an uproar in the town, and this time they decided to make her pay. The town trustees directed that her husband's grave be dug up at her expense and that the corpse be carried back to her home. And so for once, she had to pay many times for her stinginess. Okay, we are about at our halfway point. So, I tell you what, we have a short one. So we do the short one and then we go take a break, okay? Okay. This one, very short. A wheat poured in at the deer. Dear, that is. Once upon a time, a very charitable man had a daughter who was about to be married. So he went to the market to buy food for the wedding feast. Everyone knew him. People said, pointing, "There goes the charitable man. There goes the generous man." Then someone said to him, "There's an orphan in town who has nothing for her wedding." So he bought a trousseau with the money that he intended to use for his own daughter, and he led the orphan to the wedding canopy. Having brought the orphan's trousseau, he had no more than a gulden left. Since he was a dealer in wheat, he bought a gulden's worth of wheat. He put it into a cupboard in his pantry and went off to synagogue. When he came back, his wife said, "Look, there's wheat pouring in at the door." And indeed, his pantry was so full of wheat that it had overflowed into the house. And that's how he became a rich man. Okay. So we are going to take our break, and when we return, we will start with another story. So everybody stay tuned. We'll be back in 6.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
It's intermission time, folks, so hurry, hurry, hurry. Step right over to our refreshment center for the most extravagant array of refreshment goodies ever assembled under one roof. Enjoy breathtaking, mouth-watering goodies, everything from a snack to a delicious full meal. At our refreshment center, you'll find a large variety of goodies to satisfy your hunger, your thirst, or your sweet tooth. So hurry, hurry, hurry. Visit our refreshment center now. The show starts in 5 minutes. The show starts in 4 minutes. The show starts in 3 minutes. The show starts in 2 minutes. The show starts in 1 minute. And now, on with the show.
And we are back once again, just as we promised we would be. Okay, so first I want to say, Shoshi, you are doing a wonderful job reading this story. You should not degrade yourself like that. You are doing a wonderful job, and we are very happy with the job you are doing. So please keep reading. Okay, so this story is called In Heaven and Hell. Borek bar Zorek and Ber bar Shmerl were business partners in St. Petersburg. They were as close as brothers, but they had a had to part because the business made it necessary for one of them to move to Moscow. So, taking heaven and earth as their witnesses, they swore an oath that whoever died first would return to tell his friend what it was like in the other world. So, it happened one day that Beryl was in the street when he saw a man on horseback coming toward him. And the rider was Baruch. "Stop!" shouted Beryl. "Stop! Stop!" But the horseman went by and disappeared. So Beryl jumped into a cab and pursued him. Baruch was not to be found. Something is not right, thought Beryl. And so he sent a telegram to Moscow asking for news. The reply informed him that Baruch had died, and that his funeral had taken place at precisely the moment when Beryl saw the rider. And so Beryl was confident that he would soon hear from the other world. But a year went by, and then a second, and a third, and still nothing, not a word. One day, when Beryl was on the boulevard in St. Petersburg, his dead friend Baruch came up, took him by the elbow, and started to lead him away. "God preserve me," said Beryl. "Tell me how it is with you, brother, and then let me go home." But Baruch made no reply. He continued to lead Beryl by the arm to the fields and the woods until at last they came to a desert. "There," said Baruch, pointing, "you will find a cave. Walk 10 yards down and then 10 yards up, and you'll come to Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden. That's where you must ask for me." Then he disappeared. Beryl did as he had been told and entered Gan Eden, which turned out to be a tumble-down hut. Inside were a number of men reclining, reciting their prayers. It was raining. The water dripped into the room through the thatch. The place was dark and filthy, slippery. "Dear God in heaven," thought Beryl, "this is the Garden of Eden?" Then he asked, "Where can I find Baruch bar Zorach?" "In the next room," came the reply. So Beryl went into the next room where, seated on rickety benches before wobbly bookstands, he found a number of men studying Torah. In still another room, he came upon a group of Hasidim sitting beside a broken brandy bottle, singing wordless tunes or going into ecstasies. "Is Baruch bar Zorach here?" Beryl asked. "Oh, he's in hell," came the reply. "In hell?" said Beryl to himself. "And this is what you call heaven?" Aloud he said, "And where is this hell of yours?" "Go that way," someone said. "You'll find another cave. Crawl 10 yards down, and then 10 yards up, and you'll come to it." Well, Beryl crawled. What else could he do? down and then up, and finally emerged from the cave and looking around. Amazing! A building 40 cubits high, 40 cubits wide, a palace just like the riding hall in Mohilev, with a soldier in front of it wearing a fine uniform and carrying a shiny rifle. Beryl asked the soldier, "This is hell?" "Yes." Beryl went in. He came to a huge, magnificently decorated hall. An orchestra was playing, and young men and women were dancing. "Has anyone seen Barak Bar Zarek?" asked Beryl. "He's in the next room," came the reply. Beryl went into the next room and found a group of people seated around a table playing cards and drinking cognac. But Barak was not among them. "In the next room," he was told. So Beryl went into a third room, and there found him. Barak Bar Zarek, his partner, sprawled like a king in an armchair, with a glass of tea in one hand and a cigar in the other. "Hey!" cried Beryl. "Is this what you call hell? And you call the other place the Garden of Eden? Why the devil didn't you let me know how well things are going for you? And why did you have to walk me through all those dirty places?" Barak said, "How well things are going for me? Is that what you say? Ah, brother, look closely at my lips and gums. Do you see how seared they are? Do you remember how on Shabbat afternoons we used to light a samovar so we could drink hot tea on the Sabbath? And how we smoked cigars on the Sabbath? Well, at the instant I died, I was set down beside a steaming samovar, and a cigar was shoved into my mouth. And my doom is I must alternatively take sips of scalding tea and choking puffs from the cigar. Sip and puff, sip and puff, without stopping, without end." "What about the dancers in the great hall? And those drinking cognac and playing cards?" "Ah, it is the same for them. Play and drink, drink and play. Dance, brother, dance. Should any of them tired of dancing, there's a tormenting angel with a whip who lashes away, crying, 'Dance, brother! 1, 2, hop! No rest for you!'" The moral of this story is clear, isn't it? You smoke and light the samovar on the Sabbath at your own peril. Well, that's a good one. I really like that one. Okay. We have another short one. This one is called The Miracle of the Tree. There is a tale of a pious man who had a beautiful garden filled with trees behind his house. One day a hole suddenly appeared in the garden. The man prepared to go fill it. But he was about to begin He remembered that it was the Sabbath. What to do, he pondered. If I fill the hole now, I'll violate the Sabbath, God forbid. He thought it over and finally decided to keep the Sabbath. Then a miracle occurred. A tree grew out of the hole, a tall tree whose branches spread over the garden, and it bore three kinds of fruit which nourished the pious man's family. Now it was HaKodesh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed is He, who did this for the pious man because he had not violated the Sabbath. Oh, these are good ones, aren't they? Okay. This one is called The Pier Man's Rubble. Okay, so we begin. On a Sabbath many, many years ago, a poor man went to the synagogue to pray. He saw a pile of gold lying in the synagogue courtyard, but not wishing to violate the Sabbath, he left it alone. When he returned for the early evening service, he saw the gold again and again, left it where it lay. However, on Saturday night, when he left the synagogue and could at last touch the money, all he found was a single ruble. He took it home and gave it to his wife. Now, in the same town, there was a rich man who had to make a long sea voyage to acquire merchandise. The poor man's wife gave the ruble to the rich man and asked him to buy something for her. On his journey, the rich man bought many goods, but he forgot about the woman's ruble until his ship was about to sail. He heard the short thinking, I'll buy the first thing that comes my way. He met a beggar carrying a sack. The rich man asked him, what have you got in the sack? The beggar replied, 3 young cats. How much do you want for them? 1 ruble. So, the rich man bought the cats and sailed away. A storm came up at sea, and the ship was blown into the harbor of a city full of wicked people. When a stranger came to their shores, their practice was to lock him in a building swarming with mice, who then tore him to bits. They threw the rich man into the building, but he turned his cats loose, and he killed many of the mice and chased the others away. In the morning, the people found the rich man very much alive, and with 3 cats for company. Such company, huh? The people said, how much do you want for those cats? He replied, 3 sacks full of gold. Also, I want to be sent home. They gave him 3 sacks of gold for the cats and sent him home. Safely home, he asked the poor man's wife where she had gotten her ruble. She said, my husband gave it to me. He asked the husband, who replied, I saw a pile of gold in the courtyard of the synagogue, but because it was Shabbat, I didn't take any. In the evening, all I found was a single ruble. The rich man brought a sack of gold and poured it out before the man. Was the pile of gold you saw as big as this? He asked. Bigger, said the poor man. The rich man poured out a second sack of gold, and the poor man said, "Still bigger." Then he poured out the third sack, and the poor man said, "Yes, that's the size of the pile I saw." So the rich man gave him all 3 sacks of gold, and the very poor man became a very rich man. Oh, because he obeyed the Sabbath. How about that? Okay. These are kind of short stories, but they're good stories. Okay, this one is called Blood and Water. Once there was a king who went to the river to bathe, as people are known to do from time to time, and some people should do it a little more often, but that's another story. So, anyway, when he came to its bank, he saw that half of the stream was water, but the other half was blood. And there was a man in the middle trying to cross over from the blood to the water. So the king called together priests, rabbis, and other holy folk and asked them what it meant. Strangely, none of them could see anything in the river but water. Then the king sent for the greatest rabbi in the city. And this rabbi saw exactly what the king saw. Half of the river is blood that he had spilled, the rabbi said, and the other half is the tears that Jews have wept. The man in the middle is your father, who is trying to go from hell to paradise. But to do this, he must wade out of the Jewish blood he has shed, and the river will not let him. Ooh. It's a good one for a dark, stormy night, isn't it? Okay. This story, and I think this is going to be the last one for tonight. Okay, so this story is called A Letter to God. Once upon a time, there was a king whose treasurer was one of the most honest men in the world. He managed the national budget, collected taxes, and accounted scrupulously for every penny. The king valued him highly, and this irritated one of his courtiers. "My lord king," the courtier said, "you have to expect a little larceny when your treasurer is a Jew." "What are you talking about?" said the king. "He's an honest man." The courtier said, "Put him to the test. Dismiss him. I'll bet that his standard of living doesn't change. Then you'll know he's been stealing from you." The king allowed himself to be persuaded. One day he said to the treasurer, "Uncle, I can't keep you in my service any longer." The treasurer wondered what he had done wrong. "My lord, have I not served you faithfully?" he asked. "Is there even so much as a penny missing?" But the king wouldn't hear a word. He simply told him to pack up and go. "Where will I go?" Uncle said. "I'll starve to death. Have pity on me and my family." The king's heart was touched, but still he thought, "I have to test him." A peasant's wagon was sent for, and Uncle's furniture and everything else he owned was piled into it. The king gave the former treasurer 5 rubles and sent him away. The uncle came to a village where he moved his family into a hut. And now his life turned dismal. It was just before Pesach. And Pesach, as everyone knows, is a serious matter. There's no end to the things one needs, yet Yankel was penniless, with no job to be had anywhere. His wife said, "It's almost Pesach, and we have nothing for the holiday meal. Why don't you write a letter to God in heaven? Tell him it was like this and this, in short, the whole story, and ask him to send us some wine and matzah and meat and dishes and everything else a Jewish home needs on Pesach." Yonko looked at his wife in surprise. Just like that. That's my surprise look. You like that? Yonko looked at his wife in surprise. "Listen," he said. "You can write a letter to anyone at all, even to the king. But you can't write a letter to the Ribbon Shel Olam, the Lord of the universe." But she wouldn't let the matter rest. And finally he thought, what can I lose after all? So he sat down and wrote that he had been an official in the court of King so-and-so, and that he had served him faithfully and had been dismissed just the same, and that he and his family were hungry, and that here it was, nearly Pesach, and will God please send wine and meat and fish. His uncle listed everything that was needed. Then he tied the letter to the leg of a bird, and the bird flew over the city and towns from country to country. Flying thus one day, the exhausted bird saw a palace and lighted to rest on one of its window ledges. Now, this was the palace of a very great emperor, the greatest king of the world. And the emperor happened to see the letter tied to the bird's leg. He commanded that the bird be brought, and the letter brought to him. And then he read the tale of the man who had faithfully served his king, but had been dismissed. And now he was poor, and it was also almost Pesach time. And therefore he begged God to send him wine and meat and fish and the utensils and everything else that was needed. So the great emperor commanded his servants to gather all the best things listed on the list and pack them into 2 big chests. The emperor wrote a letter saying, "I am sending things you ask for." And placed this and his ring in one of the chests. Then a guard delivered the 2 huge chests, setting them quietly in front of Yankel's door in the middle of the night, and went away. In the morning, when Yankel got up, he tried to open his door, but he could not. And finally he climbed out through a window. Seeing 2 such large chests, he was afraid that something dreadful was in them, that someone might be about to make a blood libel accusation against him. He went to call the village magistrate, who ordered the chest open, found the letter and read it. "God sends wine and meat and fish and utensils to such and such a person. What a joy was in Yankel's home. He was determined to make a Pesach feast fit for a king. The envious couturier came just then to find out how Yankel was celebrating Pesach. He looked in the window and was dazzled by what he saw, the best of everything. So he ran off to the king to report, "The Jew is presiding over a Pesach fest as if he were a king, and it's all at your expense." The king got into his carriage and drove off to see for himself. And when he caught sight of Yankel at the head of his bountiful table, the king was outraged. "Now there's a Jew for you, a shameless rogue. He complained to me that he was penniless, and look at him, stuffed with money." The king ordered Yankel arrested. His house was searched, and everything was taken from him. The king personally took the ring from Yankel's hand and put it on his wife and put his wife and children into prison. They were given only bread and water, and Yankel was beaten to make him confess where he had hidden all the other things he had stolen. And when the poor man, weeping and wailing, said that he had never stolen so much as a penny from the king, and that it was God who had sent everything, he was beaten all the harder. "Don't invent tales," he was told. It happened then that the great emperor was traveling through his domain to see whether he was being well served and justice was being done. His custom was to visit all the prisons and listen to the inmates told him why they were there. When the emperor came to Yankel's country, Yankel's wife said, "Listen, dear husband, write a letter explaining why you were arrested. Tell the whole story." So he wrote it down, and when the emperor entered the prison, he stood to one side and handed him the letter. The great emperor read it and commanded that the king be brought to him. "Why did you arrest this man?" the emperor asked. "He was stealing me blind," the king said. Just then the emperor saw his own ring on the king's finger. "Whose is that?" he asked. "It's mine," the king said. "The Jew stole it from me." Now the great emperor told the king the whole story. And the king bowed his head and said, "I am guilty, sire." But the emperor was not satisfied. "Who knows," he said angrily, "how many innocent people you've arrested?" He ordered all the jails emptied, and he imprisoned the king and the envious servant and had them fed on bread and water. And he made a king of Yankel, who leads a happy life to this day. Okay, so that was our stories for tonight. I hope you enjoyed them. And don't forget that on Wednesday night is the stories Torah study with Rabbi A and the Rabbi Ruvain. Until next time, everybody, have a wonderful Pesach. And until next time, dear friends, Laila Tov.